Everyone, got a brand new episode of Agent Success Podcast here with Mr. Alex Proud.
How's it going?
A lot of awesome stuff we'll talk about. We're going to talk about ultimately what we really covered today in our team training and kind of part of that, right, which was kind of 4 key things. And we'll talk about one I want to talk about at the very end because it's powerful. We trained on this on Tuesday, but it's called Strategic Seduction. And it's very powerful. It seems kind of crazy, but I want you guys to we'll talk and cover that at the end and go deep on it to the next podcast episode for sure. And so that's something super powerful. The first thing we'll talk about today, though, is same time, same place every day. And it's a strategy that we kind of talk about and that we teach and something that's super powerful. But one thing, make sure you get the entire episode. We're going to drop a lot of nuggets. We've been getting a lot of great feedback. You've been meeting with some people. Yep. I've been with some people. And a lot of great feedback in regards to stuff you can learning about other places out there. Some people met with a guy a little while ago at a huge big box store. Got 2 leads last year, and it's not possible. And great talent, amazing guy, and the reality is the opportunities in there. And so we're here to help kind of share some opportunities, how to convert those leads you get. But ultimately, all this we're talking about is assuming that you got leads coming in. And if not, and you got to look back at last week's episode looking at statistics where the numbers of real estate, you have to have a certain amount to be able to survive, period. And if not, reach out to someone who has leads, who's willing to invest that in your behalf. I invested over 6 figures just last month in making the machine run from that regard because we're in it as a team. But first thing we'll talk about, same time, same place every day. Something we teach all the time, something we talk about here all the time. But ultimately, that creates momentum and power and execution. Yep. And so in your experience, what we teach, what's that really kind of mean?
You can always tell the difference between who executes same time, same place versus who doesn't, period. It's because it's a repeatable process. And you can't have grown and sustained success if you can't repeat what actually works. But the only way to do that is by becoming predictable.
And so ultimately, we do that to help you create that self-discipline to have, the same thing from the gym. Same thing in real estate. You got to be able to have the ability to be able to get momentum, do power, and sometimes do things that you don't necessarily want to do. Right? Ultimately, which means what? Calling leads, follow leads. And we talked about creating those habits, and we'll talk about it a little deeper. But ultimately, today's overall episode is really about fundamentals.
Right.
The fundamentals of success in real estate and how they're applied, to specifics within your business, within my business, his business, everywhere in that regard. And so ultimately, why do we do the same time, same place every day mindset? What is that, for somebody out there that doesn't understand, what's that kind of mean to them?
Well, creating these types of small disciplines that are repeatable, it really kind of rewires how your brain looks at success and a work day. Riding this roller coaster of chaos gives you a roller coaster of results. But when you have predictable habits, your results become predictable.
Exactly right. And it helps you build the momentum from within. And so, like example, the gym, I use it all the time because it's very simple. I go to the gym every morning, same time, same place every day. I've been doing that for a while. I go to ISI here locally. It's great. I just show up. That's all I got to do, and the system's there for me. But the people that have been there since I've been going for about almost 4 years, actually over 4 years, but the reality is I've seen hundreds and hundreds and hundreds come and go. The same thing you see in real estate. And the reason that I see that happen is inconsistency, right? So they're up, they're back down. They're up, they're back down. I watch them come sometimes in the morning at 6 a.m., sometimes at 5 a.m., sometimes they go at 8 p.m., and there's no real consistency that helps them have that momentum and power. And I gave an example today in our training about how I'm there every morning. Right. I really, truly hate Thursdays. Why? Thursday's a weird kind of leg day, right? Monday I like because we do squats, things like that. But Thursdays are like weird kind of stuff where we do like these weird lunges and it sucks, but I have such a pattern in my mind that's built out. It would feel like my entire life, my entire day is off if I do not go on Thursday anyway. Got up as usual, go on Thursday, boom, come through it. It still kind of sucked, but I got the result and felt better afterwards by doing it. It's the same thing with your phone calls to your leads, with your follow-ups, with your emails, and most people don't have a pattern of success, right? And it helps you fight against the number one weakness I see in real estate, right, which is for agents. Remember what that is?
Inconsistency. Oh, the freedom, really.
Time management. Yeah. We talk all the time. That's just part of that, right? The time management aspect, because most people, especially if you're watching right now, a lot of people don't have direction on what to do, when to do it, and what to do in the what order, right? So they're confused. Anyone that we bring onto the team, what's the first thing we notice? They're about their patterns.
They're horrible.
Horrible, right? The patterns are all over the place, and there's not a system of success. and we're all about reverse engineering to win. And so with that said, one of the first things we do in week 1 is help them create an ideal weekly schedule.
Yes.
And so that's ideal weekly schedule, IWS we call it, is exactly how things will be in a perfect day over and over. And it sucks, it's kind of painful, right, to do it. We have obviously examples of how they should be, but the reality is we want to make sure that we're going through that and helping you design out that weekly schedule so it's same time, same place every day. Do we hold people, accountable and babysit? No, but we help set the guidelines, and I want to help create an atmosphere for you to be able to win.
Right.
And we were just identifying recently some of the biggest weaknesses that people have in this business is lack of high-level coaching and high-level accountability. And so we help build that in there to help you coach yourself to that level you need to be in that regard. And so I want you to ask yourself, what's my level of time management? Because I was teaching today, there's always a deeper level that you can't even see yet, myself included. I look at people who are making way more amounts of money, who have much bigger businesses, who do, hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. They have a much more rigid schedule as a CEO than I do, and I think I'm pretty good, right? And the reality is there's always a different level that we can't see, and so our goal is to help teach that of what high-level elite producers. You may be one of those that are watching that. You have a machine scheduled out, right? A lot of the cold callers, they do that. Same thing every time, same place every morning, right? But you want to have the reality of your schedule set up so, one, you're empowered. I did it yesterday, the day before that, and so now when I come in to do this, I know I'm empowered, and I did it yesterday, and so it's much easier to do. And one of the agents on our team was talking about today, right? He mentioned that it became easier for him when he finally sold out and finally gave into going the same time, same place every day, that he was able to do it much easier in that regard. What was your feedback on seeing that?
You could see the power in him change when he finally did. I kind of remember the moment when he sold out to that, and where everything kind of just started turning for him in that direction, because his results became predictable, because his patterns were predictable.
Right, and so that's one thing that I wrote down, in my notes, and I taught about that. There's two things, because the problem with everyone in real estate is they get into this reactionary mode, right? Everyone seems to be in reactionary mode, which is why you ride that roller coaster, right? We'll talk about that in a second, but the reality is, and I wrote this down in my notes, attack gets you paid.
Yes.
Reactionary mode gets you the roller coaster.
That's right.
And so if you're in attack mode consistently, aka hunting, aka following up with new leads, generating business, doing that part you need to do, getting new business, you're able to keep more momentum, and that's what gets you paid in this business, aka the follow-up, right? The fortune is always in the follow-up. It's not necessarily the small detail work afterwards, which has to be done, but that does not come priority number one.
Right.
And so most people will do that part, they do what they do, then all of a sudden they get business up, then what happens? They come back down, and then they roll the roller coaster because they quit doing the new stuff, aka the attacks in the process. And so the one thing that's important to remember is that momentum in this business is everything.
Right.
And it's all about, and that's almost all the time, it's not about getting off the horse, walking around, getting back on the horse, because now you got to start back up again, which is very difficult. And so that's something that's important to kind of look at and understand in that regard. Any last feedback or thoughts on that?
On that, no. I mean, that's pretty self-explanatory.
The next most important one I want to talk about, and we have, for follow-up and for conversion for anyone, is consistency in your message. And ultimately, why that matters. Why does that matter to have consistency in your message, you think? We talked about it earlier today.
Well, because it lets people know that you're going to fulfill the promises you make, period.
And that's the one thing that we see all the time is that there's so much noise out there. I'm going to teach you about this in a second, is you got to be the signal within all the noise. Everywhere people are right now, they're in the noise. A million different agents calling, contacting. And so the reality is most people don't have a USP, a unique selling proposition to help them be able to have consistency in their message. Why is that? Because you're going to be calling on leads and follow-ups and people you're talking to over and over and over. Everyone in their relative and third best friend are in real estate now.
Right.
We're up to like 4,800 agents, right? And so the reality is you have to have consistency in your message to help you differentiate from all the noise out there. And so what happens is, right, most people don't understand the psychology of the sales, specifically buying a house or selling a house on the consumer side at a high level.
Right.
On top of that, people who aren't actually in town. We're in Myrtle Beach. It's no secret that a lot of leads you get are going to be from out of the area.
Right.
Consistency in your message is what's going to help differentiate you from the masses out there. So I call it over and over and over, and I speak with them the same way with consistency in my message, specifically my unique selling proposition, aka what makes you different, And if you don't have one, you need to get one, right? And so that's something that's very important. And the consistency in the message is what ingrains that signal amongst the noise that they're able to kind of connect with, which ultimately brings that loyalty if they're out of town, right? Or allows them to be able to meet with you and have that consistency. So we talked about the reality of having congruency. The congruency is, does the message that you're saying match up consistently with what you're doing?
Right.
Which breeds more confidence in them in regards to your actual, I guess you say, skill set, right? What are your thoughts on that overall?
Well, so a lot of times folks don't realize that, they'll blast one message out, see if it works, then they'll blast a different message out and see if it works. The consistency is exactly what gets people to understand what you're saying. And it might not always work on the first time. That's why you have to be same time, same place every day, same activity every day, same way every day. That way you can actually get to a point where it's so repeated and so ingrained that people understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, and it's going to take a lot of contacts, a lot of no's potentially, a lot of follow-up to differentiate with people who you can't get face-to-face and have a true conversation to really differentiate, especially with non-locals. You get non-local leads, that's one of the biggest complaints I hear people, I get a few leads, but I can't convert them. Especially if you're not getting a lot of leads, you got to be very good at this. And so you have to have a very clear, specific value proposition that you can communicate with consistency. And part of that may be, am I following up X amount of weeks? We have a very specific timeline and a number that we have. We even have it scored on how much we're hitting our people, right, in a dashboard with a specific number that helps you know, am I winning or not? And that's the key there, is to have that consistency and have a way to be able to measure that in that part, which is very, very important. Next thing we have is consistency in your communication. And so what that really boils down to is impressions. And so what's your thoughts on that and kind of what we talked about today and what we taught on?
So there's all kinds of sales charts on how many times and contacts and impressions you have to make in order for somebody to do business with you. Everybody knows these, but the consistency is the one thing that's not communicated in it. Sometimes these messages are that I'm going to hit them 8 different ways, and hopefully on the 8th try of a different message, it'll do something.
Right.
Try to hit it. But if it's a consistent communication and a consistent impression, that's what really converts in the long run.
And I've had people, from out of town or wherever that comes in that talk about like, hey, look, you've left me 50 voicemails over the span of 6 months or 8 months in these reality. And so it allows you to make sure you have that consistency in your communication. AKA, here's a little tips we talk about. If you call, a lot of times they're not going to answer, right? But what do? You leave a voicemail, send a text message. Why? You connect the name on the voicemail, AKA the number, to a specific person in writing to help ingrain more in their mind, right? Back to the consistency of communication. Do that every single time. Sometimes we call people over and over, and I've gotten people at the end that say, hey, look, you know what? We're going to come down, we're going to buy something, we're going to use you because you're the only one that's called me 37 times. And specifically, you're doing that with a clear message, with clear value. I'm not just bugging them trying to sell them something. We're calling them, begging them to try to get pre-approved. You have to have an offer that's value. And so we talked about this earlier. Most people, when they call these non-local leads or even local buyer leads, they don't have a clear script. They're just winging it. Literally, every person we ever interview is winging it. We found in most cases because they don't necessarily believe in the script. But the problem is the buyers online do not want an agent. They just want to look at houses. And so you got to be there to help serve them in that regard, to help serve them, give them more value. And you have to have a specific process, scripts, things like that help bring that part to life to allow them to want to be able to follow back up with you. But if you call them and the first question you ask them is, have they gotten pre-approved with lender yet? Guess what? They're going to ghost you the next 27 calls. You have to offer value and things that people want. At least that's what I found in my experience, in hundreds and hundreds of thousands of calls over the years. And that's why we track these things, and these things matter ultimately. And so it goes back to the same thing. What's the one way to be a signal, right, in a world of noise? And by signal, I mean that you connect with them in their mind, right? We're able to dial in like a radio station, whatever it is, amongst all the wavelengths around there. How do you get them to dial in? Consistency in your communication, right? I know I can turn into X, radio station because they're on there every day, same time, same station, and it's the same concept we have here. So ask yourself, am I getting enough consistency in my communication to my leads, to my past clients, right? There's so many people. I saw an example yesterday. A guy wanted to refer somebody who loved his past agent, but the guy could only remember the agent's first name. Couldn't remember the agent's last name. The lesson he shared there on Facebook was, look, call your past clients more often because I wanted to send you a referral, but I can't remember your last name right now, which is powerful, right? And so that goes back to consistency in your communication. That could be through multiple different channels, right? Phone call, text messages, emails, videos, whatever it may be, ultimately is what makes a difference, because people start seeing the difference, in regards to the noise. Right. And so that's something that's super important to do. Last part, I'm not sure where we're at in time, but I want to pre-frame what really matters. And here's the reality. Why does this thing seduction matter? Mm-hmm. Because we're not in the old times of business anymore, where everyone is getting sold something over and over and over at all times. Right. Online, on TV, on YouTube, on the videos, everything, right? If you watch a video on YouTube, it's got an ad in the beginning, everything there. And so there's so much there. People, especially in real estate, want to buy, but more than that, they want to be seduced. Mm-hmm. We want to. We don't want to be just selling. I bought big properties before people called me over and over. I want to we all naturally want to be seduced in a way to purchase something. Right. And so that's where there has to be a tack to that. There has to be a system to that. And we teach this here at a very, very high level. We'll teach a little bit more in the next episode. But one of the things that we use and teach here is called strategic seduction. And what that means is ultimately able to help people be able to get in that process and take them through an experience where they want to buy, they enjoy the buy, and they're glad they got to go through that process, right? Sure. And so that's something we do here. And so I want to talk about first thing, right, through that process. We teach one is called communicate message. Yes. What that means ultimately is I'm able to communicate a clear, specific message to the marketplace, right, to pique their interest. Mm-hmm. And so that would be, what's my value proposition? What are you offering? What are you doing? Things like that they're able to understand to help draw them in ultimately to what you're wanting to do, right? And so, what's an example of anything like that you've seen or understand anywhere in the business world?
You're saying as far as communicating our message initially?
In any business, or we all kind of want to have that process, right?
Yeah.
And so this would be something you see a video for, like an opt-in, free home search, free home evaluation. All these things are kind of the message of the value that you're offering. Sure. Out there for that part. There's got to be a clear message that helps them understand. In my mind, I look at it as piquing their interest, right? Raising their ears up to potentially looking at understanding you and kind of what that's about. Yeah. Right? Second part you have to have is what we call capture permission. Sure. You have to have permission to be able to come to them, like they say, hey, look, I want more. So probably if you're watching this video, guess what? The initial intro there, right, was the way able to communicate a message, right? You click the video, watch the video. That's a way to capture permission that, hey, look, now I'm open to this message. Mm-hmm. And if you're watching to this point, guess what? You're able to have that permission by watching that, right? We invited you to watch the video. You came to the video. Now you're watching that video. You have to do that. You also can do that like on a website through an opt-in, a text-in. If somebody picks up the phones and calls you, that's a way to capture permission. And what that means is at that point, the gate of the mind is kind of open. Sure. Because you're not able to really, I guess at that point, communicate a clear message to them to allow them to really understand that, right? And so the next we're moving these people along. We use all these things called frames and very high-level things. It's all how the psychology of the mind works. And people can say, oh, this is that sales stuff. No, this is psychology of how the stuff works, and it's really called influence, right? I don't want to sell people or manipulate. I just want to influence them by providing value and providing things to them, by inserting opportunities, inserting chances and things in their mind to have them be able to understand, like, this is pretty cool. What's the next step? This is pretty cool. What's the next step? We're able to kind of move them through that. And so that takes you to the next part, right? Next one is called convert mindset. That's what we teach the most. That's where everything's. You got to convert the mindset of where people are. Like, even with some people watching this, right? I look and I wonder, like, someone reaches out to me who's had 2 leads in a year, who is wanting to work hard, who's showing up every day, who's spending their own money in mailers without a result monthly and hasn't reached out to me. Why is that? The reality is the mindset is how this thing called the worldview. We have the worldview, self-view, and a roadmap, right? Worldview is how do they view the world. So a lot of you out there right now have this view that all real estate companies are the same or similar, right, in a way. And that could not be further from the truth. It's the same exact kind of thing how consumers think, right? They think that real estate agents are commodity in most cases. And so part of what you have to do in that process is kind of what we're doing with value here is helping you look at things. Guess what? What if things were different than how you viewed them? What if it was able to have a difference where you had high-level sales coaching? What if things were different if you had high-level quality leads? What would it be like for you? And ask yourself a different question of what if things were different out there, and if I could see things differently, my opportunities and my fruit in my life might be a little different. And so we want to help convert that through a message into your clients. We taught for almost an hour and a half the other day on this. with our clients of how to help convert that. And it takes them through an entire process. And so with clients, for example, they know that you're very good at what you do, that you are an asset to them, and they need to understand that you know what you're talking about so you can advise them to help make good decisions in the process, right? And so you're converting that mindset in that part of how they see the world, aka how they see realtors in your mind, aka how you see real estate companies, teams, things like that, right? Is there a reality that things actually might be different? I'm just doing it by sharing the reality of kind of what we do, right? The next part is self-view. The self-view part of that is like, is there, things are different, but is that actually going to matter to me?
Right.
Are things going to be different for me? So it's hard for me when I show, massive thousands and thousands and thousands of active leads to someone who's only gotten 2.
Right.
There's a reality check inside of like, can I actually do this? It's a little bit overwhelming. And so part of that conversion process is to help the prospect, aka the buyer or seller in this, realize that is this possible for me? So if they're buying a house, there's a lot of fear in the process. Somebody's selling a house, there's a lot of fear in the process. And how do you help convert their mindset, right? We call it the self-view. So not only do you got to make them understand things are different in the world, maybe there is an agent who's actually good out there, who works their butt off, who falls back up, who knows the marketplace, and they're actually pretty different. Well, just because you overcome that one, you got to overcome the thoughts and the processes inside their mind of, well, can I actually sell my house and get what I need for it? Can I actually buy a house and qualify for it and actually be able to make the payments and it be comfortable? And that's where you help them understand the process through data, through analytics, through coaching, through helping them in that process. And then the third part of that is you got to show them a clear roadmap. A clear process. For us, an example, we have a very clear, specific plan that allows agents to go 0 to 10x the average agent deal count through that process, right? The Expert Advantage Success Program we have allows someone to come in and learn the exact scripts, take quality, massive amounts of leads, understand specific buyer presentations and seller presentations to help them differentiate and get clients for life who are going to send them referrals and repeat business.
Exactly.
We have it dialed down to a science, to specific calls, numbers, all that stuff specific. And so we have a very clear roadmap for people to have that. By the way, if you're interested in that, right, you want to learn more about that, reply back to the email, click the link here. You get a free business consultation. We have a lot of you who've already reached out to us about that. I guarantee you it'll blow your mind. Anyone that you've met with that has been a different situation, different brokerage, what was their experience in that regard?
Their mind's blown when they see it.
Absolutely blown. It's almost shocking to that, the experience I had today. Amazing gentleman who had been in the business 14 years. And the reality was a struggle. And the exact words I use is, man, what you're telling me is like you're looking for water in a desert. And that's for real. And the reality is, you're probably watching this right now, is that was the situation I was in. And it was kind of interesting to see, like, saw the roadmap and the eyes were just like, wow. Exactly. And the roadmap is there. There are pieces that are there. And so don't lock yourself. And the one question I have to anybody out there that's watching this that may not be in place in the business they want things better, right? What's the reason you haven't actually reached out yet? It's got to be one or two things. The worldview, thinking that, well, maybe you aren't just different. You're just some sales guy, or people at the water cooler said this. The reality is, by their fruit you shall know them, right? Is there results that are being had? Absolutely. We do it every single day. You see the success story below this in the email. I sent some of the previous ones as well. Someone had 8 contracts in the first 60 days. Is that what it was?
Yep.
And so that's a brand new agent, right? And so the reality is the machine works very well if someone plugs in and does it.
Absolutely.
And so that's the important part. So you got to shift everyone's basically worldview, self-view, and show a clear roadmap for that. And so if you don't have those things, you want to be able to design those for your potential clients, for your prospects, so they can have a clear roadmap to be able to help overcome fear. You know what overcomes fear is a clear plan, a clear roadmap where you can guide them and show them what the actual possibility is. The next one, right, is to actually compel action. They have a problem that they want to solve, right? We're taking them from interest to desire. And at that point, you're able to show, here's how the world was for you. Here's how it could be. Here's how you are right now with your fears, right? Can I actually do that? Are they too intense? Are they too much? Whatever those stories you have in your head are, once that's overcome, you have a clear roadmap. Now the person actually acts to take action. And so with your client, that would be very simple. Signing a buyer agreement, right? Signing a listing agreement, obviously. Making an offer on a house. Getting an offer on their house. home inspections. All these are processes that you have to go through using the same psychology, right? And so you do the same seduction with your kids, with your spouse, with everyone to help influence people and have those things done. And so this is something that takes 2+ hours to teach.
Sure.
Obviously, it's a little longer than usual podcast. If you're still watching, we got some amazing, awesome stuff we'll cover next time in more detail and kind of what that means. But you got to compel action. For you, watching this from mine, what would that action be? It'd be for you to actually reach out to me, right? Yeah. You watch it, you see it. It's obviously interesting. If you're watching this podcast this many minutes in, you're one or two things. One, you're trying to figure out what we do over here, right? Which we won't actually ever share that part. Or number two, you have a problem that you need solved, right? And so I would suggest fill out the application there for a free business consultation. There's never any pressure. Here's the deal. I look at business. I can help people that aren't a fit. And I've met with a few people that say, here's the deal. Based on your situation right now, it's probably not a good fit for us. I would suggest to do this, and tweak this. And you're like, you know what, dude, that's pretty cool. And so I'm just a student and passionate about business. And so that's something that may be helpful in that regard. And the last thing, obviously, after you compel action is close for commitment.
Right.
That would be, for example, a buyer appointment, listing appointment, right? Whatever it is to actually get them, hey, look, let's make an offer on this property. That would be close commitment. Now, that's where a lot of people get to and then screw up. We talked about this the other day. Man, I got this buyer, and we've all had this happen. Dude, I got this buyer. They're going to buy. They love this house.
Right.
We're going to make an offer up tomorrow. They're going to think about it. And what happens?
They don't get back.
Right? It disappears. It's how it is. It's the be back bus, right? People are in that ether. Things are going to happen, and everyone tends to just disappear. So the next stop after close commitment is contract. All the C's. You got to get it on contract, get it on paper. Why? It's how psychology works, right? Get your people through that process. So one, of the seduction, right? One, communicate message. Clear, specific message to the clients in that regard, right? Two, capture permission to them. It's either face-to-face, through an opt-in, through a website, through a phone call, whatever it is. Permission to actually engage and go back and forth. Three, convert mindset. That's that important part, which we'll teach on next time. One, remember that's the worldview, how they see the world. Two, self-view, how they see themselves, their self-confidence, their fears, things like that. Third part of that is roadmap, right? What's the roadmap for that process? The next one is compel action, aka let's get to the next step from that. Because the last thing you want to do, and you see this happen all the time, there's plenty of people watching this right now. You see the roadmap, but they don't take the next step. And so that's a decision they have to make. And at that point, if they do, they enjoy that experience of moving forward.
Right.
And that's very, very important. And then three, close commitment. I'm sorry, last one, four, was that 1, 2, 3, 4. Compel action, 5, close commitment, and 6 is contract. And so what's your overall talk on that? Just seeing that high-level training we've done, right, and how frames work and things like that, what was your experience and how that applies to business like we do?
It completely changes the way you do business. And it's not from a point because, you want to close them and get a check. It's actually to serve them in the way that they asked you to serve them to begin with when they met with you. They came to you with a problem, a.k.a. needing a house or needing a home to upgrade for their families. And all you're doing is fulfilling that promise. But sometimes you got to nudge them in the right direction in order to fulfill that promise. And that's what this does.
And that's because people ultimately, sure, they don't want to be sold. I don't want to be sold. I hate being sold, right? And the reality is there's not a true seduction process in place.
Right.
And you've got to be able to understand that from a marketing standpoint,
Sure.
from a sales standpoint, in those areas to be able to understand it and have that. We've got to be able to move them from because here's the thing, like I like being seduced in a business world. I like buying nice things or whatever it is, but I don't want to go into the same thing we do when you buy pretty much a suit, a car, any of those things, right? You start over here and you slowly got to be moved through the process to help that regard. And so for anyone out there watching that hasn't taken action, wants to know more, here's the deal. I'm not selling anything. I'm just sharing the reality, the facts. I see things, though, in the marketplace, like the person I met with today, like they need something like this.
Right.
They will not survive, will not make it if they do not make a change.
Right.
And so if you're someone out there who's been watching, who's been struggling, who's been praying for a better way, reach out. Right? Submit on the link below. It says click here for a free consultation. That's legit, right? There's no sales pitch there.
Sure.
We go through a questionnaire of kind of how can I help? And sometimes, like I said, hey, dude, I'll probably try this and try this and try this. Or you already got the leads, you probably need to do this. And so the reality is here, I'm just trying to share value. Anyone out there that you're thinking, any last thoughts up for you?
Not at all. That covers everything.
We're going to shoot an awesome, super good one for next week to go in detail of the whole strategic seduction. Let me know your thoughts on this email. If you got questions, thoughts, send them back. We're here for this, and we'll see you all in the next video.